I always believed that hard work would be enough. That if I kept my head down, earned straight A's, and made myself small and quiet and useful, someone would notice. Someone would reward it. Maybe not with parades or applause, but at least with fairness. That was all I ever wanted, a fair shot. I was 17 when I got my acceptance letter to Stanford. I still remember the moment, the envelope, thin but heavy with meaning. My hands shook as I opened it. My heart raced. My breath caught in my chest. And then I screamed. My mom came rushing into the room, thinking I was hurt. When she saw the letter in my hand, her expression froze for half a second. And then she smiled. "Oh honey, that's amazing." I ran into her arms, clutching that letter like a life raft. I had done it. I had gotten in. I had spent the past 4 years turning down parties, saying no to distractions, waking up at 5 a.m. to study for AP exams before school. My world was made of textbooks and planners, color-coded goals, and dreams I didn't dare say out loud. But I said one now. "Mom, I'm going to Stanford." She pulled away, blinking. "Well, slow down. We have to talk to your father." That night, we sat at the dinner table. It was one of the few times we all ate together anymore. Madison, my younger sister, was scrolling on her phone, her painted nails tapping the screen. She didn't look up when I said the words. I got into Stanford. My dad looked up from his plate. "Congratulations," he said flatly. Then he wiped his mouth, set his fork down, and added, "But we can't afford it." I blinked. "What?" He didn't even flinch. "We just don't have that kind of money." My mom chimed in, trying to soften the blow. "It's just not realistic, sweetheart. Maybe community college for a year or two, and then you can transfer." But I got in. I earned it. "And we're proud of you," she said, reaching across the table. "But that doesn't mean we can pay $60,000 a year." Madison snorted without looking up. "Not like it matters. I heard people there are snobs anyway." I sat there, stunned. My appetite vanished. I looked around the table, waiting for someone to say this was a joke. It wasn't. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. I thought about the scholarship forms I had filled out, the essays I had written, the hours and hours spent chasing a dream they never truly believed I could reach. But I did. And now it meant nothing. Over the next few weeks, I tried to accept it. I looked at financial aid, took extra shifts at the diner downtown. I told my teachers I might defer. They were shocked. Disappointed. "But you're one of the best students we've ever had," Mr. Ralston said. "Sometimes," I replied, "that's not enough." Madison, meanwhile, was preparing for her summer program in Paris. Some art immersion thing. She had posted about it online with hashtags like #ParisBound and #ArtLife. I tried not to care. But one night, I passed by the kitchen and heard my parents talking. Whispering. "The tuition came out of the account today," my mom said. "Good," my dad replied. "She leaves next week. Make sure she has everything." I stopped in my tracks. Tuition. The account. Next week. I stepped back into the shadows and waited until they went to bed. Then I checked the computer. The browser history showed a confirmation email from an elite art school in Paris. The cost? Almost $30,000. My blood turned to ice. I wanted to scream. To cry. But instead, I closed the browser and walked back to my room in silence. The next morning, I confronted them. My voice shook, but I stood tall. "You said you couldn't pay for my college. But you're sending Madison to Paris." My dad narrowed his eyes. That's different. How? She has potential. I couldn't breathe. And I don't. My mom looked uncomfortable. Sweetheart, your sister's art career, it needs nurturing. It's delicate. So does a dream. So does mine. But they didn't budge. I walked away with tears in my eyes and a fire growing in my chest. It wasn't just unfair. It was betrayal. They hadn't just chosen not to help me. They had chosen her. There's a specific kind of silence that follows betrayal. It's not peaceful. It's not quiet. It's loud in its own cruel way, buzzing like static in the background of everything I do. That silence became my new reality. I didn't speak to my parents unless absolutely necessary. I ate quickly, left early, came home late. The house wasn't a home anymore, it was a minefield. Madison, of course, floated through it all like nothing had happened, like she hadn't become the living embodiment of everything I'd been denied. I got a job at a local cafe. Minimum wage, endless hours, aching feet. It wasn't glamorous. But it was something. I worked mornings before the sun came up and evenings when most people were heading home. I smiled at rude customers, wiped tables that never stayed clean, and poured more coffee than I cared to count. Sometimes, I'd glance out the front window and wonder where I would be if things were different. If I were the one in Paris, walking cobbled streets and sketching in cafes. Instead, I cleaned them. At night, I studied. I downloaded online lectures, printed free textbooks, and tried to learn on my own. It wasn't the same, but I couldn't bear the idea of letting my brain rot. I still had my dream. Even if it was bruised. My body was exhausted, but my mind wouldn't quit. I was angry. Not just at them, but at the whole illusion. That if you're the good kid, the responsible one, the obedient one, you'll be rewarded. But no. Being the reliable one just made me easier to ignore. Madison FaceTimed from Paris once. My mom propped the phone up at dinner. I didn't stay. I walked out before she could say hi. Why are you being so rude? My mom asked later. I looked her in the eye for the first time in days. You paid for her dream with the ashes of mine. Don't ask me to pretend I'm happy about it. She didn't respond. But the next day, a note was left on my bed. I know this is hard. Please don't hate us. There was no signature. No money. No offer to help. Just guilt dressed up as sympathy. I kept working. I saved every penny. I stopped buying coffee, snacks, new clothes. I reused notebooks and learned to live with less. My phone cracked, I didn't replace it. My shoes had holes, I patched them. I became invisible in my own house. Until one Sunday. It was a family barbecue. Distant relatives came over, laughing, drinking, asking about college. My parents smiled and said, "She's taking a gap year. She's figuring things out." They made it sound like I chose this. Meanwhile, Madison had just gotten into a prestigious art residency in Italy. She arrived late to the barbecue, sunglasses on, arms full of attention. Everyone applauded her. Everyone asked about her travels, her paintings, her next steps. No one asked about me. Except one person. Grandpa. He arrived later than usual, walking slow, leaning on his cane. But his eyes were sharp as ever. He sat beside me as I picked at my food. He didn't say much. Just looked around, then back at me. "College?" he asked. I swallowed. "Didn't work out." He raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" "Couldn't afford it," I said, keeping my voice flat. He nodded slowly. That was it. No lecture. No pity. But that night, as I was getting ready for bed, I saw him again, in the hallway, whispering to my parents. Their voices were low, tense. Then my father said, louder than he meant to, "It's none of your business, Dad." Grandpa replied, equally firm, "It became my business the moment you lied to her face and used what wasn't yours." I froze. What wasn't yours? What did he mean? Something cracked open inside me, a strange mix of fear and hope. For the first time in months, I didn't feel entirely alone. Someone else saw it. Someone else finally saw me. When you've been surviving on silence, truth sounds violent. The next morning, the air in the house was different. Thicker. Charged. My parents wouldn't meet my eyes. My mother set breakfast on the table as if nothing had happened, her fingers trembling slightly when she poured the orange juice. My father muttered something about going to work early and left without finishing his toast. Madison wasn't home. Grandpa stayed. He didn't speak much that day, but I could feel him watching, listening. That night, he asked to talk to me privately. We sat on the back porch. The cicadas hummed in the trees, and the summer air clung to my skin. "I set up a trust," he said. "Years ago. For you and Madison. Equal shares. Educational use only." My breath caught. "You did?" He nodded. "Your parents were made co-trustees when you were kids. I thought I could trust them to be fair. I didn't think they'd play favorites." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "So, what happened to my half?" His jaw tightened. "Gone. They used it. Every penny. For Madison's programs, her travels, her apartment in Paris." I felt sick. "They told me they couldn't afford community college," I whispered. He didn't look away. "They lied." I stared out into the dark yard, unable to speak. "I've already called the bank," he continued. "And a lawyer. We'll be pressing charges. Civil, at least. They committed a breach of fiduciary duty. They're still my parents." He sighed. "I know. That's why this hurts." For a long time, we sat in silence. Not the cruel kind. The kind that holds space for everything words can't fix. The lawsuit moved fast. Grandpa was relentless, composed, and precise. He showed me how to track paperwork, helped me understand my rights. For the first time in my life, someone was teaching me how to fight for myself, and not feel ashamed of it. My parents called it betrayal. They called me ungrateful. "You're tearing this family apart," my mother cried when she found out. "It was already broken," I said quietly. "Madison texted me once, 'I hope your bitterness keeps you warm.'" I didn't reply. Court days were surreal. Seeing my parents sit across from me, eyes hollow, flanked by attorneys, felt like living someone else's life. My stomach churned before every hearing, but Grandpa's hand on my shoulder kept me grounded. He wore a suit to every session, pressed and perfect. Like justice in human form. "I taught your father better," he said once. "But I forgot that lessons can be forgotten if they're not earned. You earned yours the hard way." The ruling came down 2 months later. The court found my parents in breach of fiduciary duty. They were ordered to return the misused funds, with penalties. The remaining assets from the trust were moved under Grandpa's control, with me as the sole beneficiary for education-related expenses. When the judge read the decision, I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just breathed. For the first time in what felt like years. A week later, Grandpa handed me an envelope. A check. A letter of recommendation. A printed course schedule. And a one-way plane ticket. Stanford. You still want this? He asked. I looked at him, the man who had stood up when no one else had. Yes, I said. But not just for me. For everything they tried to bury. He smiled, slow and proud. Then go dig it up. I packed in silence. My parents didn't help. Madison didn't say goodbye. But Grandpa drove me to the airport himself. As we pulled up to the terminal, he looked at me one last time. They tried to clip your wings. That just made you learn how to fly in the storm. I hugged him harder than I ever had anyone. And then, I walked away, into the future they told me I couldn't afford. Stanford was both everything I dreamed, and everything I feared. The campus was beautiful in a way that felt unreal, like I was walking through someone else's fantasy. Palms lined the walkways. Sunlight pooled on red rooftops. Students buzzed with ideas and ambition. I arrived in late September, 2 suitcases and a head full of doubt. I didn't tell anyone where I came from, not right away. I introduced myself simply. No mention of lawsuits. No mention of Paris or betrayal or courtrooms. Just, hi, I'm Emma. I'm from outside Chicago. I'm studying political science. But the past was never far. My dorm was small, shared. My roommate had a California accent and an Instagram sponsorship. She decorated our walls with fairy lights and prints that said things like, "Dream big." I didn't dream much anymore. I planned. I worked. And sometimes, I cried in the shower so no one would hear. The first few weeks were rough. I kept thinking I didn't belong. That I was an imposter among legacies and prodigies. But I also remembered what it cost me to be there. That price carved itself into my bones. And slowly, I let it become strength. I studied like my life depended on it, because it did. I joined study groups, met with professors, and worked part-time at the campus cafe. There was something poetic about still serving coffee, but now on my terms. Grandpa called every Sunday. He never stayed on the phone long. Just long enough to ask, "Are they seeing you yet?" Yes, I would say. They're starting to. By winter, I was thriving. Not because it was easy, but because I had learned how to survive the fire. Madison hadn't contacted me since the trial. My parents neither. But I heard things through my aunt. They were struggling financially. The court penalties hit hard. Madison lost her scholarship in Italy, something about falsified income documents. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt nothing. Until spring break. I flew home for one weekend. Grandpa had surgery coming up, and I wanted to be there. My aunt threw a family dinner in his honor. I walked in wearing a navy blazer, my hair tied back, my books under my arm. I didn't think anyone would look twice. But they did. Eyes widened. Conversations quieted. I saw my mother from across the room. She froze, glass of wine halfway to her lips. My father stiffened. Madison sat at the end of the table, her once blonde hair now dyed deep red, eyes sunken but still sharp. Her jaw clenched when she saw me. I nodded politely. Evening. No one replied. I moved to Grandpa's side and kissed his cheek. He beamed. "My girl," he said, loud enough for the room to hear. The one who didn't fold. Dinner was awkward. Forced conversation. Clinking utensils. I answered questions when asked, but I didn't offer much. Then came the toast. My aunt stood. To Dad, for making it through surgery with his usual stubbornness and strength. Everyone raised a glass. Then Grandpa surprised everyone. "Actually," he said, standing slowly, "I'd like to say something too." The room quieted again. I've lived a long life. Seen a lot of things. But one of the hardest has been watching people I love break trust for comfort. And watching someone else I love rebuild her life with nothing but scraps and grit. He turned to me. Emma, would you say a few words? My heart thudded. Every eye was on me. Every breath felt loud. I stood. Held my glass. I won't say much, I began. But I will say this, some seats at the table are given too easily. Others are fought for. Earned. And no matter how many people try to take them back, some seats, once earned, can't be taken. I met Madison's gaze. She looked away. I sat down. And for the first time in my life, I felt tall. After dinner, my father approached me. His face was tight, defensive. You think this makes you better than us? No, I said. I think it makes me free. He didn't reply. I flew back to California the next morning. As the plane lifted off, I looked down at the patchwork of neighborhoods I used to think held my whole world. But I was wrong. My world wasn't back there anymore. It was ahead. And it was finally mine.